Good morning again to everyone. Thank you so much for trusting the Headhunters and Go Productivity with your time. Our goal at the Headhunters is to add value to our clients and to the business community that we surround ourselves with. We want to see all of you grow successful businesses. And today's webinar is all about investment in your people that are going to ultimately help you drive productivity. So our theme today, like I said, is investing in people. And what does that mean? What is productivity and how do we measure it? Our guest speaker is going to show us ways to bring together innovation, leadership, and operations to drive efficiency within our businesses. Laurie Schmidt is Chief Executive Officer of Go Productivity, a nationally incorporated not-for-profit organization that works to improve the productivity, innovation, and competitiveness within Canadian firms. Laurie has her designation as a Strategic Alliance Professional and is a member of the board of the Global Federation of Competitiveness Councils, a global network of leaders that measure and work with organizations to make them more competitive worldwide. We're very excited and thrilled to have Laurie on our call today. She's going to give us about a 40-minute chat, and after that, we'll have a couple of minutes for some questions and answers. Or feel free to type into the chat box as we go if you have any questions. We will be saving those questions for the end of the presentation, and then we'll try and get Laurie to answer as many as we can. There'll also be a recording as well as a copy of the slides, which will be available after the webinar, and an email will be sent out with the link on how to access these slides and recordings tomorrow. So with that, I am proud to hand it over to our guest host, Laurie, or guest presenter, Laurie Schmidt.
Thank you, Danielle. And I just want to thank you and your awesome team at the Headhunters for the opportunity to share some of the work and learning around the topic of productivity, and in particular, the people part of that equation. And we've had a long relationship with the Headhunters, depending on them for talent, as well as the value-added services and expertise that they bring to clients, like the webinar series that they've had. So let's dive right into it. Thank you for your time this morning. And my goal is that we'll give you a taste of productivity, how we measure it, look at the value of our people throughout this productivity and competitiveness discussion. We're going to look at the drivers of competitiveness. We've taken a little bit of a stab at utilizing Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we're going to dig more into what are leading and lagging indicators. What does that mean for productivity? And importantly, what does that mean for our people? We're also going to take a little bit of a side trail into innovation, because it's such a common word today. How do we look at and really share a little bit of our learning and work around innovation? And a little bit more also about how you can be more intentional about your innovation and how you develop those systems of innovation for your people. We want to look at how you could even potential measure and quantify the investment in your people. And we're going to take a real quick look at a simple case study at the end so that you can start to see impact and leave you with some people practices. We'll go through things fairly quickly. We're giving you a lot of content, but again, as Danielle said, the presentation will be made available after the webinar, and we're available for questions. So let's jump right into a poll first off. What do you think productivity is? Downsizing, cost cutting, time management, small incremental improvements, or replacing people with technology? I'll give you a couple minutes to commit. Oh, wow. We have an impressive group today. So of course, it is small incremental improvements. It's about being more resourceful. Often though, there's been misnomers around thinking that it's going to mean downsizing or cost cutting. Time management is always an important component, but really it's those small incremental improvements that drive productivity and innovation. So what is productivity? Let's look at just the real basics. The real basics is that for a unit of input, what's the output? And outputs can be your product sold, your task completed, and for example, tons of steel erected. Input can be your person hours, your dollar capital investment, or your time. And the reason this is important, that international measures look at output per employee. And so we started to dig deeper into what does that really mean for our people. The other thing is that we look at little p productivity, meaning kind of what's that input-output ratio at the individual level, so maybe tons of steel erected, or person hour, or maybe action requests or invoices processed per hour. But also, what's the big P productivity? That's at your system level. That could be at the company or division or a branch output. And is it at an acceptable level compared to others? And this is where we start to look at the equivalency of measuring competitiveness. And there's some really good models out there, but one of the reasons that we've looked at, this labor component is that it's a way that nations measure their prosperity. So our GDP per capita is actually measured by our labor times our productivity. And we focused a lot on the labor side. So everything, that we might read these days keeps talking about are we employing the most number of people in our population? Are we utilizing the most available labor that's out there? And how hard are we working? And actually we've done, as Canada, we've done really, really well this year. We actually worked the longest number of hours. We utilize the most range of employable people that we can. And we're now, going to kind of extremes from a person can be able to start to work to beyond kind of retirement age. We're utilizing a lot of that. And so it's only in recent years that we've really started to focus on that productivity side of the equation. And in fact, we've given labor kind of a bad rap over the years because we're blaming them for our productivity decline when it's really, we should be looking at the productivity side of the equation, which is really boils down to two main things. How do you look for efficiency and optimize what you're doing? And how do you find new value to which your customer is going to pay? And it's really this very same thing at the firm level. How do we look for efficiency within all of our operations, and how do we look for new value? And Deming was so right when he said 95% of all troubles in an organization are caused by the system, and only 5% are the fault of the people. So let's look a little bit more at the people side. As we do that, we have dug down even deeper into those drivers of productivity, both on the efficiency and adding value side, by looking at operations. So that's looking at supporting continuous improvement initiatives, that's Lean, Six Sigma, maybe theories of constraint. We focus on collaboration. So how do you look for efficiencies and adding value between your customers and your suppliers and employees? But innovation is also a big piece to this, and we're going to dig into that deeper further down the presentation. But small ideas make a huge impact as you're continuing to look for efficiencies and adding value. And then you need the leadership that brings teams and your community and your employees together. And certainly it needs to be based on a strong strategy and a well-managed system. And we're going to look at what the hierarchy of these are in a few minutes. But ultimately, productivity is about resourcefulness. So how are we unleashing the potential of our people and the dollar resources that we have and the time? And it's about working smarter, not harder. We know theoretically the value of investing in our people. We read a lot. We know that investing in your people leads to higher engagement and performance, higher traction and retention rates, and that leaders are more likely to invest in employees that are going to stay. But you may have come across this, and we've heard it more than once. What happens if we invest in developing our people and then they leave us? And the key really is, what happens if we don't and they stay? What happens to your organization? And that might sound funny, but it's actually very scary. We have a number of companies in Canada that are saying that's too high a risk. And I would suggest it's too high a risk not to invest. And the other thing that we're seeing is that there's a big talent mismatch going on. And so the challenge is really looking at how are we investing? How are we focusing that training and investment and systems for our people? Canada right now has 1.32 million unemployed people and over 400,000 unfilled jobs. And that's the range of types of jobs. So we couldn't really say it's around a particular area. It's a whole range of jobs. So we've got people without jobs and jobs without people. And this isn't just a Canadian challenge. The Global Talent Index also indicated that there's 200 million people unemployed worldwide. And despite over 33 million people looking for work in just Europe and the USA alone. There was also an interesting survey that was done by the Manpower Group in the US that said that 52% of the US companies are having difficulty filling jobs. And they often blame the prospects' lack of job skills and technical skills, and the company cites the candidate's lack of experience. But really, how are we actually investing in our people to further the strategies of our own business? It's got to be a combined effort. So those organizations that invest in workforce capabilities and who measure it and value the workforce competency that they're building within their businesses, they're going to be the ultimate winners. But the challenge is, where do you invest? So we tend to, invest in kind of the latest themes, the latest methodologies that are going around, but how does that really tie strategically into our business? And how do we start to actually then measure what's the return on that investment for the investment in our people? And so we started to look at this model. This is fairly new work, and we've just been published internationally around this thinking. Is that we realized, back to those earlier drivers of productivity that I mentioned, is that we realized that there's a little bit of a hierarchy. That really the foundational piece and the most critical piece is your people on that bottom level. Looking at how we help them be innovative, how do we help them be collaborative, those knowledge and skills and abilities that are going to build our business. And we call them also the collaboration around innovation collisions. How are we arranging for them to share ideas? And we'll talk about that in a second. But then also that leads to stronger management and leadership, get cultural alignment about how you're trying to increase the productivity and innovation within your business for more competitiveness. That leads to opportunity to really optimize your processes. And you've got people aligned, they understand the terminologies and the principles, and they're now able to be more creative around looking at those process improvements. It also then allows you to make wiser decisions in capital investment and even in continued research and development, maybe even in automation, and ultimately then into success, financial and growth of your business or an economy. The challenge is that we often, as we start to measure these areas, we put the cart before the horse, in that we're really always trying to, what's the ultimate job creation and growth, which we call lagging indicators, versus how are we measuring each level of input to show what that output's going to be. So just really quickly, lagging indicators are the measures, the goal accomplishment. It's easy to measure, but very hard to influence. And the leading indicators predict the goal achievement. You can influence them, but it can be really difficult to measure along the way. But we have some ideas about how to do that. So again, lagging indicators, really are the effects. So it's numbered new jobs, it can be new markets entered, your overall sales, investment in capital investment. So those lagging indicators can predict even future trends, but there's no opportunity to change the results once you're there. You really can't change the past. So how do you know what you're improving, or how are you trying to impact those effects? You can look at new markets, which is good, but also you could actually make a mistake and make a choice to go into a market that could lead into great losses by strictly only measuring the new markets that you're targeting to go into. The leading indicators are really kind of the cause part of that diagram I showed you earlier. Could be investment in research and development. It's a lot around innovation. So how are you generating ideas? How are they being implemented? The training that you're doing, collaborative learning hours, your strategy implementation. And so the improvements to one small process might not have a large impact on overall performance of the system, but you can start to see how small investments start to have big impacts over time. So small daily improvements are key to staggering long-term results. So a quick poll for you that are listening: what type of indicators do you typically measure? Leading, lagging, both, neither, hadn't thought about it before? Just waiting for the results to come up. And that's quite typical. So it's very common in all of our strategies and strategic planning to really focus on the lagging indicators. So new jobs, sales increase. And so what I'm suggesting through this, and as we continue through the presentation, is that you start to give a little bit more thought to how you might look at some of those leading indicators. And I'll even give you some examples of what you might want to look at. So keep in mind that investment in our people as human capital is a leading indicator. And we want to later on take a look at how we might measure that too. Now, improving on measuring investment in our people, there's no silver bullet. We know that there's value in using all kinds of different metrics, and sometimes we get metric fatigue. So it's knowing when to use them and what story does each metric tell. Which metric best suits the people who are going to receive the information? So what type of behavior is it going to incent? And so then what comes first? Let's go back to our pyramid that we showed before. Things that we can begin to focus on and measure our investment at each level. So if we talk about our people and the innovation and collaboration that I talked about before, we can actually start to measure things like certifications, the competencies, even distinct types of content and offerings and disciplines that you're training your people up on, training hours, ideas that are generated, and ideas that are actually qualified that you start to look at moving forward. At the leadership and management level, you can start to look at employee turnover, reaching your strategic goal achievement, conversion rate, which means how many of those ideas generated were actually implemented and what was the result of those. As you start to look at operational excellence, now those become a little bit hard and fast. You can look at your inventory turns or your order lead time, order filled, cost of goods sold, maybe the dollar now amount of those ideas that were being implemented. And then the next level, it becomes easier to measure the investment in capital investment, in focused R&D, and investment in equipment, perhaps, investment in people as in additional people for new markets. And then ultimately, you can now start to measure some of those lagging indicators around job creation, your revenue growth, your market expansion, and product launched. And what we're starting to find is that we've just got a group of companies starting to go through this type of process, is that they're now starting to track each level and adjust things along the way, but they're beginning to see exactly what the output is towards their growth and competitiveness of the business. I want to take a quick sidebar, though, into innovation, and the most important thing for me in all of this is around how do we help our people and mine the ideas that they have, get that creativity, get the thinking. Our most valuable resource is our people and the great minds that they have. So how do we set up systems that actually mine those ideas? I love this quote from Harvey Firestone, who said, capital isn't so important in business, experience isn't so important, you can get those things. What's important is ideas. If you have ideas, you have the main asset you need, and there isn't any limit to what you can do with your business and your life. And so investing in your people is also training for creativity and innovation. And how are you setting up systems that actually allow for those ideas to be utilized? So just very quickly, because innovation has become such a big buzzword, I just want to talk to you about how we look at innovation. We really see innovation as the advancement of technologies or ideas or methods through the introduction of new improved processes and products. Innovation is two or more people or organizations working collaboratively towards a common goal of advancing new or improved technologies, ideas, or methods. And it goes beyond new products and technology. So often we think about technological invention. And Apple's a good example. They have revolutionized certainly the music industry and the iPhone industry. But remember, they began by compiling a number of existing technologies into a brand new framework and platform. But if you look at some of the other components of innovation, you can look at market extension. So Arm & Hammer comes to mind, that they revolutionized their business by moving baking soda into the deodorizer market. In business models, we use the example of eBay, who actually reinvented buying and selling products internationally from any location and any size of organization. For process improvement, we think of Walmart. So love them or hate them, they have the most competitive, most efficient supply chain in the entire world. And they've looked at innovation through process improvement primarily. For system solution, we look at FedEx. And FedEx has found a way to integrate tracking right from the materials and packages themselves to their vehicles and to their carriers, knowing exactly the quickest route and the simplest route to be able to be the most efficient in delivering and they can track a piece of mail or a box in real time at any time. And then for product improvement integration, that's the idea of bundling, programs, services, offerings, products together, which I just used Xerox as one, is where, they started as kind of a photocopying company, but they started to then integrate a whole bunch of functions into one machine. And now they've actually evolved into more of the service industry. So that gives you a sense that innovation is actually broader, and you can be looking at all these aspects of innovation within your business. So, quick poll, in which of these following ways do you innovate? And you can check all of them that you might do within your business. Oftentimes not all at once, but we'll just wait for everyone to click in. Almost there. Process improvement, that's great. Because that's where you can actually see the you can start to see how those incremental improvements begin to impact your business. But it's great to see that actually everyone's been looking at a number of those areas. Just as a takeaway though, this slide and the whole presentation is available, as I mentioned, but here's some additional tips so you can think about ways that you could be innovating within your business through market extension and looking especially for those needs in the marketplace where no solutions exist already. Business models, reconfiguring always, and things are moving so fast. So I forgot to mention that earlier, that that the world is moving so quickly, that everyone's inventing new ways of doing things. Keeping this type of thinking front and center will be incredibly valuable as you look at productivity and innovation for competitiveness. I just wanted to spend a moment on that, going a little bit deeper around the life cycle of innovation. That we often, realize that the life cycle is there's an idea, we qualify that idea, you start to look at planning and resource allocation timelines into testing, then implement, and then the return on investment, that you start to recoup that, and then it will decline, and you're on to the next innovation. And that timeline for that life cycle is getting shorter and shorter. One of the challenges we have is that we want to jump from idea generation straight to implementation. And so allowing time and investing actually in learning for your people around how to do this better would be a recommendation that I would have if you want to continue to be more innovative and productive. What's also really important here is those little blue dots all over the place at each one of those stages. Those represent what we call collisions. And so they're the human interactions. It can be within units, it can be within your suppliers, it can be with other divisions, but all of those types of interactions will help advance and enhance the innovations that you're looking at. So I want to move on a little bit more now to actually some real new work is around how we could start to measure really the value of investing in our people. A lot of you show that you're already looking at process improvement, and so that's what's kind of described by this little bit of a diagram. So you've got people in the right boxes doing the right things. Hopefully you're investing in a lot of those things. What that diagram doesn't show enough for me though is how you're allowing for interactions and idea generation and continuing to always improve whatever situation you're in. But the brand new thinking that I'm talking about is there a way that we could start to measure the investment in our people and really see what that return is? I don't know that we do a very good job of that. And it really, I think there's an investment in people quotient that we need to start to look at and look at the impact in our overall business success. We've started to take a stab at this, and I'll give you a bit of an idea, and it would be really neat if you guys, any of you try this out. I would love if you let me know how this works out for you, because we've just started to get some attention about it nationally and internationally, and we're just starting to run through, as I mentioned, a number of firms trying to work at this type of evaluation. And it's really essential that we start to capture the investment, because it's really a tremendous indicator of the future value and the value, and it sends a message to your workforce. You're increasing the workforce capability, and that continues to foster that continuous improvement culture. So we think there's a couple of steps. One is maybe changing our perspective as how we look at the investment in our people, how we start to track hours, defining what that human capital metric might be, applying the human capital metric, and then celebrating that achievement. And so it is a bit of a building block scenario. So first of all, for changing your perspective, realize that it's not always just going away to training. Webinars are great, but there's opportunities for employees to learn even just time away from their core roles in order for them to grow and learn and bring new and greater value back to the organization. So if it's effectively planned, this time shouldn't be regarded really as outside of their jobs, but really it's time invested in the company's future growth. And this is about long-term gains. So you can realize that, you know, time invested in people to pursue information can lead to productivity gains and enhanced performance, but it will also lead to higher levels of innovation. So who's doing what out there that you'd like to send some of your people to learn more about? So then, I'm going through this kind of really quickly as a little bit of a model here, but you could start to track the hours. So keep metrics around all the time that you're spending on internal and external training, learning, collaborative problem solving. You know, as a management team, qualify which types of exercises would apply, but you could look at if you have an innovation committee, collaborative learning environments, maybe business improvement initiatives, training overall. So start to calculate those and track them maybe over a 6-month period. And so I just gave an arbitrary, you know, number of hours tracked over 6 months among 15 employees and said, let's say that's about 300 hours. So then examine the cost and revenue structure and establish a general value of each hour on your employee's time. And this is your human capital metric. The human capital metric can incorporate the total employee cost. So think about their salary, their benefits, and the opportunity cost. What is the cost to the business if you don't invest in this employee's future? So you can look at employee value per hour, salary and benefits, and as I said, that opportunity cost. And that's kind of your multiplier. And so we gave it, as we looked at our operation, we just kind of came up with a arbitrary human capital multiplier of $80 an hour. Is what we thought the overall value in general terms for our people. And so then we looked at applying that. So $80 an hour times the 300 hours that we were calculating, that's $24,000 of investment in our people, human capital, over 6 months. So what's different than this model than others and just tracking your training expenses is you're actually tracking the overall investment in the person, in your people. And then you can start to correlate it directly to your innovation, to those ideas generated, implemented, to increased performance through efficiencies, and to overall growth of the organization. And then you want to celebrate. So how are you communicating this with your staff? I think what's really important here is that they start to understand that you're making a significant investment in them and you're seeing the value that they're bringing into the future value of the organization. It's opportunity to build in recognition and rewards programs that are a little bit different than we've measured before, because it's tied to a range of investments in our people for productivity and innovation. It's also connected to a range of outputs when we talked earlier about that whole range of metrics. So let me just give you a really quick example about what that looks like in a case study, and try to pull all these things together for you in a quick story. So we worked with a general contractor and a masonry contractor. So actually this was with 2 companies when we went through the same information. They're working on a museum construction project, and their concern was, and their objective is that they were having challenges around their stone installation. So stone installation productivity. We focused on training, so productivity fundamentals for everybody. It included the project team and the general contractor and the masonry contractor and the unions for the organizations. We also worked on collaborative process improvement workshops and looked at things like value stream mapping and broke down their processes. We developed a roadmap and we continued to coach them into implementation. And we helped them develop an action plan. And that included even the quality inspections, which seldom happens with the general contractor and the trades all doing it together, because they were all now working towards the same goal, were aimed and trained up with the same information. And the real big find that they had is a whole new way of doing their scaffolding erection, which saved 27% ultimately on how they were doing that stone installation. So if we put that back into the earlier pyramid of productivity drivers, we even looked at, remember I kind of kept the sample metrics that we started to look at earlier. And if we use that case study for working through that example, we see that we started with the training on productivity and innovation fundamentals for the project team, including the GC and the contractor, first off, before we went anywhere. And then we were able to have alignment of both organizations, their management and their leadership teams, to approve the focus, the plan, the teams, the support, and allocate the resources that they wanted to pursue. Then, armed with that, they were able to, and their project teams were able to work through collaborative process improvement workshops and to look at mapping out their systems so that they could develop the roadmap of how they wanted to continue to improve on the stone laying. Didn't take a lot of capital investment in this example, but that's a great place. There would have been a very focused capital investment. They ended up looking at new scaffolding processes, which included some capital investment, but most of it was an adjustment, and it was innovation is really came to bear here, is that they were able to implement a number of ideas that were generated and worked through qualification through the process. And then ultimately, when we look at those lagging indicators in the end, they were able to increase the number of stones laid per hour by 27%. And really interesting that it was even adjusted for, even this was a period of very heavy rainfall, and it was still so successful. So a very simple example. Another just really quick story that went through almost a similar type of process where they realized as they went through the mapping process, armed with the training and the workshops, realizing that they were not measuring and not quoting their labor in their job costs properly. And that had a finding for them of $100,000 a year for a small company of about 40 employees. So again, working through the same process. So just really quickly to recap is that when you start to look at really focused investment in your people, so really making it focused on where the business is going, areas that you want to improve on, things that you want to encourage them to do for idea generation, that small investment really can be huge economic gain for you and your company. I just want to give you some final takeaways because, as you know, I was heavy on the innovation side, which is a real big passion of mine, that helping to generate ideas. We often ask ideas from our people, but then we don't do anything with them. And very soon, people quit giving you ideas. I always say that suggestion boxes are a place for ideas to go to die. And so you need a very transparent process for moving ideas forward and helping your people know the kinds of ideas you're looking for as you're trying to build and continue to be competitive in your business. So track the innovation talent that you've got, and really search for it at the college and university level that you want to bring into the business. Have a program, and we talk about developing a system within your business that will find and promote and move forward creative and innovative programs or products or ideas. You can even tie individual bonuses and salaries to increases in innovation that are tied to that system. And then define and promote values within the organization that's related to innovation. Include innovation in your leadership and development plans. Have a formalized or structured idea review process. Provide internal training in creativity and innovation practice. Look for ways just to generate a different way of looking at things, a different way of looking at your business. Use collaboration or social media to share knowledge. So just as we're doing webinars today, you can be doing that with all of your people and even your partners and in your supply chains. Fund innovation projects, even external to the organization. Maybe partners with others and those that are your customers or suppliers to look at ways that you can do things better and value add together. And then reward innovation with more engaging work or greater autonomy. What we find is that people are so engaged when they have an opportunity and a place for ideas to go. So I'm going to transition now back to Danielle, but just to quickly say that one of our process and product offerings is called the Productivity Arc, and that's really around an assessment. We have an assessment tool process, developing a roadmap for a firm, and then coaching. And today we wanted to offer up a mini virtual ARC, which is that preliminary consultation on productivity, innovation, what are the pain points, and access to the productivity assessment tool, an assessment, a very deep assessment and debrief on the response to the assessment tool, and a roadmap recommended for your productivity journey. Thank you so much for your attention. I look forward to the questions that you might have.
Thank you, Laurie. Really appreciate it. There was a lot of information in that, and just a reminder that we will be sharing slides as well as a recording with you, because there's certainly a lot of content in there. We do have a number of questions, and a lot of these questions are coming from guests that weren't able to make it today. The first question that we had is, in your opinion, what percentage of budget do you think organizations or leaders should be devoting to training individuals on to help drive their overall productivity within the organization?
That's a great question. There's no rule of thumb. I can tell you that a number of the organizations that we see as being more leaders in this field are devoting up to 25%. Now, that's not a straight training budget. Remember, it captures all of those other elements of saying, do we give them other learning examples? Do we set up innovation labs? So a range of things. But 25% is a pretty high percentage for training. Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, when you talk about capturing ideas, what are some of the things that you're seeing organizations do that you've seen are unique and exciting for capturing those ideas? I would agree that, we've got such a wonderful mix of people, such a wonderful, I look at my team, and we've got so many wonderful, smart, intelligent people at the table. And as a leader in my organization, I want to be able to harness those ideas and do something with them. Is there something or a strategy or something in particular that you're seeing that really works well with organizations?
So one thing that's fairly simple, we've started that within our own organization, is that the traditional way of moving an idea forward would be to send it to your supervisor, who takes it to the leadership team or management team. The individual who submitted the idea doesn't really know how that conversation went oftentimes. Sometimes they can present on it, but they don't really know what the output is or why they get an answer or not. So we've done with ourselves and with a number of our businesses is actually made it very visual. We've set up an idea board. So the individual needs to get buy-in from a number in their working unit or on the plant floor. And they put up an idea of what they think will improve the business or improve the flow or improve a process. And so they write that down, and they get a number of their colleagues to initial off and that they're supporting that idea. Then they have 24 hours for a supervisor, a leader, to actually qualify, follow up, talk to them more about that idea, and talk about how they would move that idea forward or why it wouldn't go forward, because sometimes there's some very rational reasons depending on the resources. And so we found that if you make it really, really visible and start to move that idea board forward, or idea forward through the idea board and see what the results would be, we found then more and more ideas starting to come to light. People are really good about understanding why you can't move something forward at a particular time if they feel that they've been heard and the idea has actually been investigated. And the real critical piece here is you have to do it quickly. You have to be able to respond to the ideas fast and start to implement them fast. And that leads to ongoing innovation.
Right. And that was actually one of my questions about, how do you can't implement everybody's ideas. So how do you make sure that people still feel engaged? So thank you for answering that. One of the other questions that we had coming in from one of our guests that couldn't make it today was with the 80-20 rule, obviously 20% of the people creating 80% of the production, how would you recommend doing this, changing this so that you see a bit of a reverse in the organization?
That's always a good. The best thing that I would recommend, that's a long conversation, but one of the best things to do is a buddy system, is start to look at those that are not performing well, is putting them part of the team of your stronger performers. You'll see them actually rise to the occasion rather than leaving them alone. Now, there's a whole conversation around now the right fit. I mean, as you start to look at what we laid out here, it gives you a different way to evaluate the types of people you need to be able to advance the goals that you have anyway. But the other area is really look at who you partner them with. Partner them with some gazelles who are going to help pull them along and help encourage them. Also, find out what excites them. I mean, just spend time finding out what excites them. It might surprise you. There's very specific areas that you could assign around the whole idea generation when you know what they're passionate about.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I think with that, unless anyone else has any questions, and please feel free, we found that with a lot of these webinars, the questions come after the webinar. So if you do have any questions, you are certainly able to reach out to us. We do have an email address that will be posted at the end of the presentation. But we are going to put up, just in closing, we are going to be putting up a poll on your screen. So please, if you could complete the survey, it will give us some feedback on how we performed, what topics you'd like to hear in the future. We'll also, as I said, be following up with an email tomorrow, which will give you access to to Laurie's presentation and to the slides. Laurie had talked a little bit about the draw, so please go ahead and enter the draw. We'd love for one of our guests to win that. It's certainly great value. Thank you, Laurie. Appreciate that. And as I said, if you didn't get to a question today, email it to us at the address on your screen, or you could always follow up with one of the recruiters that invited you onto today's call. And for the rest of the summer, we're actually going to be taking a break, but we do have some exciting topics lined up for the fall, so please stay tuned. We will keep you updated. And Laurie, again, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you all in the fall.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.